601. Something started to writhe beneath Julian's feet, shifting faintly at first, then gradually spreading outward, creeping over the ground around him. Calling out your domain. The deacon stared at Julian before shaking his head. At the same time, those around him started to get ready. Domains weren't difficult to handle. The key was in not entering them. So long as one didn't enter them, they were essentially useless. There was a reason why nobody fully used their domain and only partially used it. This was because pulling someone into a domain demanded extraordinary strength and precision. Though Julian was powerful, he was outnumbered, and the deacon surpassed him in raw strength as a tier 7 mage. With that being said, his emotive magic has far surpassed my expectations. The deacon turned to look at his comrade on the floor. His expression grew serious then. If he had to compare himself to him, the deacon felt he was lagging behind. This was mainly because he wasn't specialized in combat, but even then, the deacon wasn't someone to be trifled with. The fact that someone stronger than him had been defeated by Julian. Further adding to the fact that they were all equipped with tools capable of handling high-level emotive magic, it became incredibly clear that Julian's emotive abilities were far beyond what he had originally expected. I'm afraid, not even a tier 8 mind mage should be capable of handling something like that. The thought, it made the deacon extremely apprehensive, finally getting a hint as to why the saint was so wary of him. But nonetheless, he was still manageable. Lifting his head, he stared at the approaching domain. By now, the frontliners had retreated while the mages immediately started to cast spells, directed in Julian's way. The key here was stopping him before he could fully get his domain out. Shoot! The spells all rained down on Julian at once, his bloodied figure remaining still as the spells approached him. Bang! A terrifying explosion ensued shortly after as the spells managed to hit him in the body. Ho! The deacon took an amused breath as he saw Julian remain standing, the domain beneath his feet continuing to inch forward. Somehow, he had managed to resist the attacks coming from all sides. Of course, while he did manage to resist them, it wasn't without any injuries. Blood continued to flow out of his body as the expanding domain beneath his feet slowed down significantly. The deacon could see from just a glance that he was on his last leg. He just needs a little push. He thought about going forward to finish things, but hesitated. Quote. He was reminded of what had previously happened when someone got too close, and immediately felt apprehensive about moving forward. Taking a deep breath, he calmed himself down. There's no need to act. He's on the verge of collapse. I should play it safe. The deacon was just cautious by nature. He didn't want to take unnecessary risks when everything was flowing well. And so, lifting his head and looking at the mages, he shouted, "Shoot again!" Bang! The spells rained down on Julian again, his figure shaking, and the domain beneath him stopping completely, almost moving back. Then, thump! Unable to hold on any longer, Julian stumbled to his knees, his chest rising and falling as blood dripped down the floor. Another wave of spell was about to fall on Julian when the deacon raised his hand. Stop! Everything ceased the moment he spoke. Silence filled the surroundings. With all eyes on Julian, the deacon remained standing where he was. It's impressive how you're still clinging to your domain even though your body is about to give up on you. The deacon's praise was real. Julian's body was clearly on the verge of breaking down, and yet, he still stubbornly clung to the idea of expanding his own domain. The deacon shook his head, lifting his hand to beckon the frontliners to move forward. Given that they couldn't kill him, they had held back quite a bit. The losses were quite heavy, but given the importance the saint had placed on him, the deacon could only obediently follow. Make sure to be careful. Don't kill him. Just, Pausing mid-sentence, the deacon frowned. He suddenly started to have a bad feeling as he looked around him. However, regardless of where he looked, he couldn't notice anything strange. Even the domain that had been expanding out of Julian's body had completely stopped moving. In that case, everything was well. It was then that he saw it. The slow, yet shaky curl of Julian's lips as he slowly raised his head to look in his direction. The deacon's heart clenched then as his mouth opened, but by then it was too late. Quote. Exclamation mark question mark quote. The space beneath him wiggled, and the surroundings turned completely dark. What the? The deacon looked around him, his expression unable to hide his shock as he found himself within the confines of a domain. But how? He had been so sure to keep his distance away from the domain he had been trying to expand out of his body. It was logically impossible for him to be able to trap him in his domain. Unless A distraction? No, that's not possible. I felt it. That was his real domain. It wasn't an illusion. However, it felt different than this one. Indeed, what he felt from the previous domain was different from the one he was currently within. But how could it be different? There was no way it could be different. No way unless. That's impossible. Waves rippled in the deacon's heart as he looked around him. It was dark, and he felt completely isolated from the world. He couldn't see, hear, or sense anything. Just pure empty darkness. I need to calm down. He's still weaker than me. Taking a deep breath, the deacon calmed himself down. Even if he was within Julian's domain, and he was put at a disadvantage, he was still stronger than Julian. Not only that, he wasn't alone. There was no way for Julian to handle him. It shouldn't take long for him to break through the domain and escape. I'll do that. The deacon channeled his mana, a terrifying pressure bursting out from his body as a series of magic circles manifested around his body, floating in the air. The deacon's sharp eyes scanned the surroundings in search of some sort of point he could exploit. While brute forcing his way out wasn't impossible, he didn't want to completely waste his mana unless something unexpected occurred. He also felt that it would lead him to become extremely vulnerable, which didn't align with his cautious nature. There, as if sensing something, the deacon's gaze quickly fell towards a certain spot in the distance, and a burst of light shot in that direction. Shoo! The speed of his attack was instantaneous, arriving at its intended target in a matter of seconds. Ah! A scream pierced through the darkness shortly after, throwing the deacon off. Stupefied, he looked in the distance to see one of his men on the ground, a gaping hole in his chest. Shit! The deacon cursed, realizing he had been duped. Anger boiled from deep within his chest as the realization hit him, and his eyes scanned the surroundings sharply. "Where are you?" he shouted, his voice booming throughout. "Don't think you can win with just this. All you're doing is delaying time. Quickly give up resisting and come with me amicably. I've been holding back the entire time for the Saint's sake. The last thing I want to do is kill you." The deacon's voice once again boomed throughout the entire domain. However, even as he spoke, he received no response back. Instead, he felt several different spots around him squirm. His body twitched the moment he felt them, but he held himself back. He felt they were the same trap from before. Whew! The deacon took another deep breath, his expression twisting from the boiling rage building up on his body. "I can't kill him. I can't kill him. I can't kill him." Over and over, he had to remind himself that he couldn't kill Julian. Things would have been a lot easier if he had the authority to do so, but the Saint's orders were law. He had to respect the law. "This is your last and final warning. If you..." The deacon's words were cut short as he felt something coming from beneath his feet. Hastily looking down, he saw several purple hands emerge from the ground beneath, reaching out to grasp his legs. Tisk! Clicking his tongue, the deacon kicked the ground and jumped back. Swoosh! The hands reached out for nothing but air. However, things weren't over. As if predicting his movements, the space around the deacon shifted, and he saw even more hands emerge, reaching out to grasp him from all directions. Snap! Snapping his finger, a shield made of light surrounded the deacon, blocking all of the hands from reaching him. A curse-related domain. Looking around, the deacon saw over several dozen hands surrounding his shield, attempting to make a breakthrough. However, it was meaningless. The strength of the hands was insignificant. "I'm starting to get really annoyed," the deacon muttered to himself as he stared at the hands closing in around him. With just a glance at the scene, he had more or less grasped the nature of Julian's domain. It was a curse-type domain, granting him free control over these eerie hands that emerged from every direction. He could see how many people would struggle to escape such a domain. Nonetheless, it wasn't anything impressive. Nothing like what he had expected before. And right as he was about to open his lips to speak, he stopped. So did the hands as they moved back. What the? Blinking his eyes, the deacon saw a red orb floating within the black void. A red orb? Since when? The deacon felt something build up in his throat the moment he saw the orb. Something about it didn't make sense. It felt detached from the domain. Foreign, but at the same time, it also felt connected to it. That makes no sense. Leaning in, the deacon felt his lips dry out as he examined the red orb closely. The longer he stared, the more an ominous feeling stirred deep within him, creeping up from the pit of his stomach. It was then that it hit him. A motive. Wham! Another orb appeared, this time green in color. The deacon's eyes widened all of a sudden as the creeping feeling from before intensified. Wham! Wham! Purple, blue, pink. Orbs continued to manifest around him, slowly filling the space around him. In the blink of an eye, orbs of all colors filled the space. The deacon felt his breath leave his body as he looked around him. A possibility manifested in his mind as he stared at the orbs, but he quickly shook his head. That's impossible. There's no way. He denied the possibility with all his might. Accepting it was the same as accepting the impossible. There was no way it was possible. This was all an illusion. An illusion. ... But was it really? As the orbs surrounded the deacon from all sides, the hands that had also surrounded him started moving, each reaching out for an orb. From purple to red, from purple to green, from purple to blue, the hands changed color in accordance with each orb grasped, and the deacon felt a lump form in his throat. Before he could truly grasp what was happening, one of the red hands clenched and smashed into his shield. Bang! Huke! The deacon flinched as the shield around him suddenly trembled. Taking a step back, the deacon stared at the hand, his grip tightening on his shirt as the possibility he had fought so hard to deny settled sharply in his mind. How could this be? He could barely breathe as more and more hands grasped for the orbs in the air, turning in his direction. He wanted to deny the possibility at all costs, but staring at the sight before him, the deacon could only think of one reason for the changes around him. This was ... the combination of two domains. 602. Bang! The barrier shook, and so did the deacon's heart. Hands erupted around him, dozens, maybe hundreds, each one shifting in color like bleeding oil. The red ones swelled, pulsing with violent energy as they ballooned in size. Then, with a deafening crack, they slammed into the barrier surrounding him. The impact rippled like thunder through the air, and the protective field trembled under the force, groaning as if it might shatter. How does this make sense? The deacon's expression twisted with confusion and uncertainty. What he was currently seeing. It made no sense at all. It completely shattered his common sense, and in that moment, he was unable to remain calm. Bang! The barrier rippled again, and the deacon took a step back, his chest growing heavy. He was already at a disadvantage, considering he was within Julian's domain. Added to the fact that he couldn't kill him and the shock he was currently experiencing, the deacon was slowly being pushed back. 1 step, 2 steps, 3 steps. He was getting pushed more and more. Even so, he couldn't care less. Staring at the numerous hands around him, smacking against his barrier, he felt his mind grow blank. Curse. A motive. He could feel the two different properties mix in together in a way that shouldn't have been possible. But more than that, how could there be two properties like that? Two domains. How does this even? The realization took his breath away, the shock and disbelief settling in his chest. The deacon had witnessed many things in his lifetime, things that twisted the mind and scraped at the soul, but nothing compared to this. What he saw now tore through the fabric of his understanding, obliterating every shred of logic he clung to. His breath slowly left his body, and for the first time, he couldn't think. He could only stare, paralyzed, as his world was covered by hands. But the shock didn't last for very long. Bang! UHK! The relentless barrage finally jolted the deacon from his daze, his hand pressing against his chest as he felt something rise from deep within his chest. A faint cracking sound accompanied the feeling. Crack! Veins of light spread across the protective field, spider webbing in all directions. He turned, eyes wide, taking in the chaos, and took a deep breath. Then, another blow. Crack! A red hand struck yet again, and the fractures deepened. The deacon clenched his teeth and finally managed to regain his composure. Damn it! Without wasting another second, the deacon stepped forward. A soft ripple of divine light bloomed beneath his foot, spreading outward in graceful waves. The fractured barrier surrounding him shimmered, then pulsed. Cracks stitched themselves shut with unnatural speed, healing rapidly with each step that he took. And within seconds, the barrier was whole once more, its radiance blinding. The hands came to a stop for a split second. The silence that followed felt suffocating. Letting out a breath, the deacon's eyes sharpened. Though it's impressive, I can still handle it. The only issue is that I sense the curse element from each hand. I can't let them touch me. Plans started to formulate in the deacon's mind in that moment. He could see that he was in a disadvantageous position, but the situation was yet to be hopeless. It would only turn helpless if he allowed the situation to drag on, as his mana would quickly deplete. In that sense, it quickly became clear to him that he couldn't remain still, waiting for the red hands to continuously pound his barrier. He quickly had to find Julian and get rid of him before it was too late. But how? How could he find him? Bang! The deacon's eyes darted sharply, scanning past the tangle of hands surrounding him. His mana pulsed outward, probing the air as he searched for the source of it all. He's using a lot of mana. It shouldn't be too hard to find him. His thoughts were quickly proven right as he managed to sense the source of all the hands. Ha! A smile slowly tugged at the deacon's face as he finally spotted Julian. Found you. Without wasting another second, the deacon took a step forward, the barrier around him rippling as the red hands grew frantic, pounding the barrier surrounding the deacon. Sweat dripped down from the deacon's features as he moved forward. The relentless attacks were taking a toll on his mind and mana, but he was still able to keep going without much issue. He only had one goal, and one goal only as he moved forward. Reach Julian. Bang! The closer he came to Julian, the more frantic the hands became. They pounded, pounded, and pounded with all their might, faint cracks constantly appearing on the barrier set up by the deacon, but with each step that he took, a faint ripple of light formed beneath his feet, healing the barrier instantly. It took a lot of concentration for him to persist like this, but his efforts were starting to pay out. He was now closer to Julian than ever. And after finally spotting Julian, standing still as a dozen hands clung to his entire body from below, the deacon smiled. It's no use. The deacon took another step, inching closer to Julian. Bang! Bang! The red hands punching his barrier grew more frantic, and even though Julian's face was expressionless, the hands' frantic movements perfectly displayed his inner turmoil. Crack! With the hands growing more frantic, the barrier naturally sustained more cracks, with them expanding every second. Though this was a little troublesome, it didn't matter as the deacon was now just a few steps away from Julian. His lips pulled up as he raised his hand, prepared to finish things off when. Exclamation mark question mark quote. The red hands stopped moving. Silence. As the surroundings grew quiet, the deacon suddenly felt that something was off. His instincts screamed, but his body remained still, caught in his own pride. What more could he do? Then, too late. From behind the crimson hands, new ones emerged, sleek, thinner, and glowing a sickly purple glow. They moved differently, slower and freer. They slipped through the barrier like smoke, as though it didn't exist. How? Panic marred the deacon's features as he raised his hands and stepped back. At the same time, he clapped his hands, and the purple hands froze on the spot. They were noticeably weaker than the red ones, but he couldn't afford to let them touch him. The deacon thought things had calmed down, but that was the furthest thing from the truth. With the sudden lapse of concentration, the barrier around him started to flicker as the red hands from before came to life again, smashing against the barrier in rapid motions. Bang! The barrier finally cracked, and the hands frantically moved towards the panicked deacon. Damn it! His eyes turned bloodshot all of a sudden as numerous magic circles floated around him, each one shooting a light beam in the direction of the red hands, shattering them at once. In just a few breaths, over half of the red hands were gone. The deacon was just about to sigh in relief when. There's more. Green hands emerged from behind the red hands. They were thinner and slimmer than all the other hands, and the moment they moved, the deacon's eyes shook. Fast. Too fast. He quickly tried to cast another barrier around his body, but the moment he tried to do so, the purple hands surrounding him started to move, filtering through the incomplete barrier. To make matters worse, the red hands were still coming at him from all sides, and unable to focus on everything at once, he felt something touch the bottom of his foot. His entire body froze as his head rigidly lowered to see a green hand clamping onto his ankle. Shit! The deacon's heart sank. At the same time, a certain sense of weakness started to infiltrate his body, numbing his mind for a split second. It wasn't long, just a split second, but that was enough for the numerous green hands to reach him, clamping him in all directions. Ah! A scream pierced through the darkness as the green hands reached him. With every touch against his body, his mind grew hazier, a creeping weakness seeping into his limbs, dulling his thoughts and stealing his strength. But if that wasn't bad enough. Bang! The red hands came down, smashing against his stomach, sending him crashing back as another hand appeared, smacking him and sending him crashing in the opposite direction. Huke! The deacon tried to resist, but it was no use. Very quickly, the curse effect from Julian's hands started to take over his entire body, and by the time another red hand smacked against his back, he found himself unable to think properly. Thump! Falling face down on the dark floor, the deacon tried to stand up, a groan escaping his lips as he slowly raised his head. It was there that he felt something appear before him, and as he raised his head, he saw the silhouette of a figure standing in front of him. I told you. His voice was hoarse, seemingly from extreme exhaustion. This, wasn't the right time. The more he spoke, the hoarser his voice became. Why did you, have to make me do this? Why did you have to push me to this extent? He brought his hand forward, placing it directly on the deacon's face. Is it fun? Julian's hand squeezed. Is it fun, to piss me off? Is. Julian's words were abruptly cut short as he suddenly raised his head. The darkness that engulfed his surroundings quickly dissipated shortly after as light finally returned. And as it did, a figure appeared not far from where Julian was, his expression calm as he looked at the surroundings. Towards the multiple bodies on the floor, alongside those of the deacons and other members. A smile soon marred Jackal's features. Would you look at that? Eyeing Julian, Jackal took a step forward. It wasn't so hard, after all. Looks like you're finally ready to hand over my blood, fake fragment. 603. My body screamed. It begged for relief, help, but there was no help. I had exhausted myself to the point where I could hardly stand. Slowly lifting my head and staring at the figure standing before me, my heart sank. I tried to move, but all I felt was indescribable pain. To be honest, I didn't expect you to be this strong. Jackal's words rang in my mind, slowly and deliberately. He seemed in no hurry. I felt my chest tremble at the thought. Why would he be in a hurry if I'm in this state? As things stood, he probably didn't think of me as a threat. I didn't blame him. Had I been in his position, I would have probably thought the same. But this was fine for me. The more time he dragged, the better things were for me. I just need to recover enough to move again. So long as I manage to touch him. You're thinking of trying to recover as much as possible so that reinforcements come, or better yet, you can move again and get rid of me. As if reading my thoughts, Jackal chuckled as he took a knee to get a better look at me. There won't be any reinforcements coming. His voice was laced with confidence as he spoke. The barrier surrounding this place isn't something that just anyone can detect. They'll need to be strong enough to detect it, and even then, they'll need to be quite close to detect it. My heart sank as Jackal looked around. Unfortunately for you, the Church of Oricleus is currently hosting an apology banquet to all the top experts within each empire and church. They're all too far to notice a thing, so you can quickly give up on the thought of waiting for help to come. Jackal stood up, reaching for his waist and slowly unsheathing a clean silver sword. He stared at his own reflection on it before pointing it in my direction. It's just the two of us at this moment. Me, and you. He cracked a smile. Since you've taken care of everyone that I've sent, nobody will interfere. You don't like me, right? Now's your chance. I'll give you the possibility of fighting me. Staring at Jackal, I felt my teeth slowly clench. He was clearly taking pleasure in the situation. And yet, I was helpless to do anything about it. No, it wasn't over. Gritting my teeth, I forced myself up, every joint and muscle in my body screaming in pain as I staggered a couple of steps back, barely holding onto the wall behind me. Jackal swung his sword a couple of times before casually leaning on it. Not bad. The fact that you can stand is impressive. I continued to remain silent, trying my best to catch my breath. At the same time, my eyes fell on the small creature in the distance. It was none other than Pebble. Not yet. I only had one chance to turn the situation around. I planned on taking full advantage of Jackal's arrogance to take him down. This is my best and only shot at coming out this alive. At this very moment, more than ever before, I felt the possibility of losing everything. It was clearer than ever before, and my entire body felt heavy at the thought. Did you have enough time to rest yet? Casually looking at me, Jackal's smile remained. There was something off about his demeanor. He seemed a little too confident, too calm. Why was he like this? I tried to wrap my mind around the situation, but it was simply impossible. My mind was too exhausted to think properly, throbbing at every second. The only thing I could hear was the faint sound of my own rough breathing as I struggled to keep myself standing. Do you want to know a fun fact about Oricleus? Jackal pulled himself away from the sword and raised it, tracing his finger across the body of the sword. Outside of being capable of seeing the future, Oricleus was quite famous for his sword. He was an excellent swordsman. I blinked my eyes, then slowly raised my head to stare at Jackal. Sword. You seem surprised. Jackal shook his head upon seeing my face. I'm not surprised a fake like you doesn't know, but it's true, Oricleus was famous for using his sword. With his ability to see the future, nobody could beat him in a sword fight. He could see through every action someone was going to make before they could even make it. How can anyone beat someone like that? Pointing the tip of his sword my way, Jackal's expression twisted in a cruel smile. Guess what? I, too, am capable of performing such a feat. Tightly gripping the hilt of his sword, Jackal's face suddenly turned serious as he took a step forward. In that moment, my entire body tensed. He's coming. I could feel it with every fiber in my body that he was now planning on ending things. I clenched my teeth and sharply looked in Pebble's direction. That was when Pebble acted, placing its foot against the floor and suddenly increasing the gravity of the surroundings. What? Jackal's movements suddenly slowed, and his expression changed dramatically. But by the time he realized, it was already too late as a green orb appeared in my mind and I forced myself forward, arriving before Jackal, my hand pressing against his face. I got you. The moment I grabbed onto his face, I didn't waste a single second and poured all my emotions into his skill. I didn't hold back at all and just poured everything all at once. Fear, anger, surprise. My mind twisted and churned as I poured everything in, but I ignored the pain, pushing myself to the point of passing out. I had no choice but to. It was either me or him. Like I said, a voice suddenly whispered next to my ear as I poured every little emotion I had in me. Stunned, my entire body tensed as Pebble's voice reached my ears from a distance. Human. Unfortunately, it was too late. There was nothing I could do about it. I'm the inheritor of Oricleus. Your every action, I can see through it. From the little cat to your emotive magic. I saw all of it beforehand. In that moment, it finally dawned on me. The reason for why he was so confident in himself. He had already seen everything in advance. Spurt. The blade punched through my back just moments before its edge appeared before me. Every part of me froze as my mind blanked at the sight that presented itself before me. Ha! A strange sound escaped my lips as Jackal pulled the sword away, the sole of his foot kicking my back and sending me crashing against the ground. Thump! Hooick! Hooick! Stumbling forward, I gasped for air, Pebble's shadow appearing before me. A constant ringing sound echoed in my ear as the right side of my vision turned completely dark, and I just barely managed to keep myself standing. In that fleeting moment, I understood what was happening. I'm dying. Indeed, I was. A strange darkness seemed to want to embrace me from all sides. And yet, I was strangely calm. Was it because I had experienced it before? I wasn't scared, nor did I feel anything about it. I just, If, Hashum. Jackal's voice reached my ears. I could hardly make anything out. The only thing I could still see was the faint gleam of his sword. In that moment, I recalled the words he had previously said, and a thought occurred to me. No wonder I felt vaguely familiar with Leon's sword back in the academy. It wasn't a coincidence. Nothing had ever been a coincidence. If only I knew earlier. I would have practiced more with it. I would have tried beating Leon with the sword. How would he react if he couldn't even beat me at his own specialty? The thought made me want to laugh, but I couldn't laugh at all. My fingers twitched, and I blinked my eyes slowly. Jackal's figure was standing before me. Hihima, Hyan Mn. He was still spewing gibberish. I couldn't understand a single thing he was saying. No, I don't like this. With the little strength that I had in my body, I squeezed my hand. I felt my hand grip onto something. Golden lines appeared in my vision shortly after. They covered my vision, shifting and twisting in all directions. It was beautiful. It felt like I could just stay and watch the golden paths for as long as my life allowed me to. But no, there was something else that caught my attention. It stood beyond the golden paths. It was darker, deeper, more infinite. I wanted to grasp it. And yet, the moment I tried, I couldn't. It was too far from me. I needed to cut it. So that's what I did. Swoosh. I slashed the air. Jackal moved back, effortlessly avoiding my slash. Oh, you still have some fight in you. He spoke again, his tone sounding mocking. Oh, I can hear him again. I was surprised I could hear him again, but I wasn't sure if it was a good thing or not. Slash. With the little force I had left in me, I slashed the air again, tracing the golden path in front of me. My vision grew darker with each slash of mine. I didn't care. I wanted to slash the golden paths in Jackal. Not yet. A bit more. I continued to slash the golden paths in front of me. My movements were sloppy, and I couldn't move forward, but I tried. Swoosh. First slash. Second slash. Third slash. I could feel my swings becoming more refined with each attempt. Jackal, who had previously been avoiding the attacks without much care, started to look more and more serious, until his expression was extremely grave. The darkness that clung to my vision intensified. I was close. Gradually, the golden paths started to change, and my movements became faster and faster. Jackal was now getting pushed back. I grew closer and closer with each swing of my sword. The sword paths changed directions as the movements became harder to follow. I still followed them, but at the same time, my life slipped with each swing. I knew in that moment that it was already too late for me. I was dead, a dead man standing, but even in death, I wanted to see beyond the golden lines. I wanted to see what lay beyond it. Let me see it. Swoosh. Sensing an attack, I dodged, slicing up with the sword. Clank. Sparks flew in the air, and Jackal appeared in my vision again, his upper body exposed. I saw it then. The golden lines combined towards one singular point. That was when my world froze. Ah, I found it. The ending point. I stabbed forward, the world around me shattering. But that was also the moment I felt it. Thump. My death. 604. Everything was going as planned. Jackal had foreseen everything. He acted in accordance with what he had seen. His confidence stemmed from his vision. And yet, how is this possible? He took a step back, staring at Julian, who was still standing. In his hand was an unassuming black sword while his head was lowered. His entire body was drenched in blood, pooling beneath him. In his current state, he should be dead. From the blood loss to the sword that had pierced his body. There was simply no way for him to remain standing. And yet, this doesn't make sense. What sort of trickery is this? A thought crossed his mind as he looked at Julian. It all started to make sense then. Necromancy. Indeed, Julian was a curse user. It wouldn't be strange for him to know necromancy. Perhaps, the only reason he was still standing was because of some sort of necromancer-related power he had placed on himself. So that's how it is. Although Jackal wasn't sure, he didn't feel like Julian was still a threat. To him, it was over. Struggling even in death. How pathetic. Shaking his head, he took a step forward, his sword raised as he got ready to end things. He was just about to slash down when, quote, exclamation mark question mark quote. Julian raised his head, his eyes hollow. Staring into his eyes, Jackal felt his back drenched with cold sweat. There was something about his gaze that left him completely unsettled. And as if that wasn't enough, he soon moved. What? Jackal's entire expression shifted, especially when he saw Julian raise his sword and slash down in his direction. Swoosh. It wasn't anything impressive, just a single slash. And yet, it almost seemed to follow his movements, tracing down like a snake ready to bite. Even then, Jackal managed to avoid the strike without much of a problem. He was just about to retaliate when Julian's second strike came. Swoosh. This time, it was faster, more precise, and more ruthless. Jackal barely had any time to process the strike before it was already on him. Clank. Sparks flew in the air as Jackal managed to block the attack. But, the third one came. It was even faster than the previous one. Jackal wasn't able to react in time. All he could do was stare at the approaching sword with his own shock as he just barely managed to get the body of his sword to block it. Bang! For the first time, he was pushed back. How is this possible? Jackal's shock intensified when he saw Julian approach him. He seemed to be in some sort of trance. Tracing some sort of path. Jackal's face twisted when he saw this. At the rate things were going, he was going to lose. He took a deep breath and closed his eyes for a brief moment. His thoughts quickly calmed down, and when he opened his eyes again, several different Julians appeared in front of him, all attacking him from several directions. The world seemed to slow down in that moment. He could see all the possible paths that Julian could take to attack him and acted accordingly, lowering his body as he pushed his foot forward to counterattack. This was his trump card. This was the reason why he had never treated Julian as a threat. Their tiers didn't differ by too much, with Julian being slightly behind. His emotive magic was also vastly superior, scary to some extent. But to Jackal, it was nothing. He could see it all. Whatever Julian planned, the moment he activated his ability, he could see it all. And since he could see it all, there was simply no way for Julian to win. Or at least, that was how it was supposed to be. She-ng. A shattering sound manifested within Jackal's mind as he witnessed the 7 figures ahead of him shatter all at once, a single sword tracing down from an angle the images hadn't covered. Quote. Exclamation mark question mark quote. Jackal's eyes widened at the sight, his expression quickly shifting as he scrambled to readjust his posture and block the attack. But how could he? As if the sword knew exactly where he was going to move, it altered in the air, crashing down against him from above. Clank. Sparks flew yet again as Jackal was sent scrambling back, his steps shattering the wooden floor beneath as blood seeped out from his mouth. Huke. Holding onto his chest, he felt a burning sensation running through his body as he tried his best to recompose himself. But that proved to be an impossible task as Julian appeared before him again, his entire presence seeming massive as he raised his sword up. Ah! Jackal screamed, his vision shattering once again as the sword came cleaving down from above. Bang! His body was sent reeling back again, his back crashing against the nearby wall as more blood flowed out of his mouth. Thump! Falling face down, Jackal let go of his sword as it clattered on the floor. His expression grew pale as he saw Julian move towards him again. No, no! He rushed to grab his sword, but by then it was already too late. Julian was already upon him. Jackal's eyes widened in that moment as he activated his skill. That was when he saw it. Darkness. That was all he saw. And in that moment, it became clear to him. I'm going to die. No, he screamed in terror as Julian's sword came cleaving down on him, his eyes turning bloodshot, and the mana inside of his body building up to form a shield. The sword soon reached the shield and then it stopped. Silence. Ha! Ha! As Jackal's heavy breathing echoed in the air, he stared at Julian, who had suddenly stopped, his entire body frozen in motion. What? Startled, Jackal hurriedly moved away while coughing several times as blood poured down from his mouth. Quickly reaching for his sword, he pointed at Julian, but even then, he got no reaction. As if frozen in time, Julian had stopped moving completely. And that was when it finally dawned on Jackal. Dead. Julian was dead. His face was drained of all color, and his chest was no longer moving. He also didn't feel a single heartbeat. He's dead. Mumbling the same words again, Jackal's lips quivered before he suddenly burst out laughing. I knew it. Ha ha ha. His laugh boomed throughout the surroundings as he moved towards Julian. There was no way he could have survived that. He had been certain the first time. How could someone survive a stab in the body? Even if he had some sort of skill that allowed him to live for a little longer, there was simply no way for him to remain standing like that. It's impossible, and he was proven right. Jackal didn't waste a single second. Moving behind Julian, he stabbed his sword into his back, piercing his heart directly. Spurt. Blood splattered all over the walls as Julian's body limply fell forward. Thump. Ha ha ha. Jackal burst out laughing again, his face twisting as he bent over and ripped Julian's shirt apart, displaying the wounds he had placed over him. Placing his hand over Julian's back, his face grew maniacal. It's time I finally take what belongs to me back. A powerful glow suddenly erupted as the blood in Julian's body squirmed before slowly moving and assimilating into Jackal. Ha! Jackal's chest trembled as he felt the blood slowly moving from Julian's body to his. The wounds that he had sustained from Julian's last-ditch attack started to heal rapidly while his vision grew hazy. He felt a strange, yet familiar power start to settle into his mind as his vision started to become clearer and clearer. In that moment, the world around him suddenly started to open up. Jackal felt like he could see and predict everything, foreign images flashing in his mind as the blood continued to seep into his body, slowly accumulating. His head raised as his face twisted in euphoria. Right then and there, he finally started to feel complete. He finally started to feel like Orichalus. Ha! As a turbid air escaped from his lips, Jackal removed his hand from Julian's body. His expression, which had previously been twisted, calmed down as he looked towards his surroundings. Everything, it feels so different. He couldn't quite explain the sensation he was feeling, but he felt a lot more clearer-headed. But still, quote. Lowering his head and staring at his hands, Jackal's brows furrowed as he noticed strange blue veins covering his entire hands. He felt a strange sense of rejection coming from the blood he had just assimilated. But he wasn't too worried. Give or take a couple of years. Jackal understood that he had yet to fully merge with the blood. It would still take some time for him to do so, and in that time, he planned on going back to the church and slowly absorbing everything. By the time he did, a faint smile tugged at the corner of his lips. Quote. The Church of Oricleus will be the only church left. Slowly lifting his head and looking at his surroundings, Jackal took a step forward, and his body disappeared. At the same time his body disappeared, so did the bodies of all that had been present. All besides Julian, as he remained on the floor, his body completely lifeless. Gradually, the surroundings started to repair themselves, and it wasn't long before everything was restored to how it was once before. The barrier covering the surroundings shattered, and a strange silence filled the surroundings. A silence that was soon shattered by the single sound of a knock. Talk. Julian. It was Leon. He had come to visit Julian in order to pick up some of the stuff he had left before. He had expected Julian to answer immediately, but received no answer. Julian. Leon frowned, his brows furrowing. I know that you're in there. The innkeeper told me that you just came in. I also have your keys. Talk. Leon knocked again. However, even as he knocked again, he received no response. Growing irritated, Leon placed the keys in the lock and unlocked the door. I'm coming. Click. The door opened, and Leon entered. It was as he was about to open his mouth that he finally saw Julian, sprawled on the ground with not a single breath in him. Julian. His expression changed drastically. Hey, wake up, Julian. Leon tried to wake him up, but there was no denying the scene in front of him. Julian. He was truly dead. 605. Julian. Leon's expression changed the moment he realized that something was amiss. However, it was only when he opened the door and entered that he realized just how bad the situation was. Shit. Leon hurriedly rushed in Julian's direction, his face falling as he noticed the severity of the wounds. What the hell happened? He scanned his surroundings but found that nothing was amiss. In fact, everything was completely normal. Noticing the severity of Julian's wounds, it felt like he had been in a tough battle. And yet, hold on. Leon's face paled when he reached Julian. As he dropped to the ground, a look of horror swept over his face. No. Julian's state, it was a lot worse than he had originally expected. No, in fact, it was beyond worse. He's not breathing. Leon felt his entire body freeze at the realization. How could this? Placing his hand over his neck, he felt no pulse as well. He checked again, but the result was the same. Leon's hand started to tremble. The truth had yet to sink into his mind. How could it sink into his mind? There was no way Julian would die like this, right? How could he die like this? It makes no sense. Leon's chest started to tremble. Something pierced his chest as he looked at Julian. Why did it hurt so much? It wasn't supposed to be like this at the start. The two of them were merely people with two different circumstances trying to use each other for their own goals. This was how things were supposed to be from the start, and yet, before he knew it, the two of them had grown closer. Julian was no longer merely an acquaintance, but he was also a friend. Perhaps his only friend. He was someone that Leon had no trouble serving. Even though they usually joked with each other, those were merely jokes. Leon went along with it because he saw how fun it was to see Julian suffer. Yes, it was fun. He had some of the most fun in the most recent years that he had ever had in his entire life. So, quote. You can't die just yet. Leon's hands continued to tremble, but he was able to quickly regain his calm. It wasn't over just yet. He could still feel that Julian's body was warm. That meant that he had only just recently been killed. In that case, it wasn't too late. Leon took a deep breath and soon closed his eyes. Blue veins soon started to manifest all around his body as a faint blue glow appeared from deep within his chest. Leon's expression started to twist as he began to experience a certain pain. However, he resisted the pain. He focused his entire attention on his inner body, towards the chalice that rested in his heart, and as his body started to shake, he began to place his hand into his chest, slowly retrieving the chalice from out of his body. Yuck. The pain was unimaginable. It felt as if his heart was being ripped out of his body. However, he bore through the pain. He had to bear through the pain. He was now a prince, but he was still his knight. He had yet to quit his job or be fired. He was useless. He had always failed in his job. In fact, it was always Julian who did most of the work. What sort of failure of a knight was he? Leon looked towards Julian on the floor as blood started to leak out of his nose. He smiled then. Why you can't say that I haven't done my job after this? Leon's face twisted as those words left his mouth, and gradually, he managed to pull the chalice out of his body. Slumping over, his chest heaved up and down unevenly as he felt weak all over. But it wasn't over yet. He stared at the chalice in his hands, a complicated expression marring his features. But it's the only way. Staring at the black liquid within the chalice, Leon opened Julian's mouth and poured it down his throat. A change started to occur then. It's working. The wounds that marred Julian's body started to rapidly heal, recovering as though he had never sustained them in the first place. His complexion also started to turn rosy as he returned to how he once was. Leon's mind eased seeing this. Although the liquid within the chalice was extremely important for his growth and future, he didn't even hesitate to give it all to Julian. He could always get it again. Make more. Even if it would stunt his growth by years, he didn't regret it. After all, it's my duty. His duty as a knight. Clank, clank. Once all the liquid entered Julian's body, overcome with weakness, Leon slumped back, the chalice falling onto the ground as Leon heavily gulped for air. It's done. The wounds on Julian's body had all healed. He should be out of danger now. Leon sighed in relief. His body was weak, and he feared he might remain in such a state for at least a week, but he didn't regret his actions one bit. Slowly lifting his head, he turned his attention towards Julian, who still had his eyes closed. At a glance, he looked like he was sleeping. Leon felt relieved seeing this. However, that relief didn't last very long. Julian. Frowning, Leon forced himself back up as he moved towards Julian. At a glance, there didn't seem to be anything wrong. His actions had healed Julian completely. Logic would say that he should be good now. And yet, why? Leon pressed his hand against Julian's neck, his eyes widening. Why? Why is he still not breathing? Leon took a deep breath to keep himself composed as he stood by Julian. Perhaps it takes time. I know for sure I wasn't too late since his body was still warm. He should theoretically be all good by now. So why wasn't Julian's heart beating? Leon squeezed his mouth as he stared at Julian. He suddenly felt a sense of dread creep through the inner parts of his mind as his hands started to shake. It can't be, right? Leon looked at Julian, his expression slowly crumbling. A joke? Was this some sort of sick joke from Julian? Indeed, if it were Julian, he'd try to pull this sort of twisted joke. I'll play along. Leon stared at Julian's body, his eyes slowly turning bloodshot. You'll reveal it's a joke soon, right? Come on, I'm waiting. At the same time, in a different location. Following the events that had transpired on the first day of the Congress, and the misunderstanding that arose as a result, the Church of Oricleus invited all the top representatives present to a banquet in order to express their deepest apologies and make amends. At the helm of the gathering was Cardinal Ambrose, the top delegate from the Church of Oricleus. First and foremost, we want to share our deepest condolences with everyone present. I'm sure none of us wanted the event to begin like that. The cardinal held onto a glass as he spoke. His expression was calm and serene as he addressed everyone present. While it is true that we were innocent, it is also true that we were too hasty with our actions. Everything happened so fast that we weren't able to properly assess the situation. I do hope that none of you present took offense at our actions. The many people present shook their heads, offering their own toast. Cardinal soaked in the atmosphere, his expression calm. However, his outer calmness was merely a facade. He was anything but calm. How could he not be worried when Jackal was out there completing such an important mission? Even though everything had been thoroughly planned in advance, with him hosting the event specifically to distract all the top powers as well as providing Jackal with enough force to take someone of Julian's caliber down, the cardinal was still worried. What if it failed? What if Julian had some sort of trump card? He also had the blood so. However, his worries only lasted for a few more minutes. It wasn't long before he received a message, and his expression relaxed completely. He did it. The cardinal could hardly contain his joy. With Jackal having now completed his mission, it wouldn't be long before the Church of Oricleus would stand above all churches, and even the Round Table. Ha ha ha, he suddenly burst out laughing, looking at everyone present with a serene smile. It pleases me so much to see all of you forgive us like this. I truly appreciate all of you present. His words were met with several comments filled with goodwill. At the end of the day, the Church of Oricleus was a well-respected church. Not only did they have a lot of influence in all four empires, but they were also rather strong. Who didn't want to get on their good graces? As the event was in full swing, Orson, alongside several delegates from the Nurs-Ansifa Empire, appeared in the corner of the venue. The atmosphere was rather light. Following the investigation by the Saints, they understood that those from the Church of Oricleus were indeed innocent and that the masterminds behind the incident were someone else. While that investigation was still ongoing, they decided to send several delegates to attend the banquet. At the end of the day, they did try to save the emperor. Is everything all right? However, not all seemed to be pleased. Sensing something, Orson turned his attention towards Delilah, who sat in her seat, her eyes seemingly unfocused. She held a glass in her hand as her rosy lips pursed together. Although she looked no different than usual, as someone who had raised Delilah since young, Orson was aware that something was wrong. For good measure, he retrieved a piece of chocolate and handed it to her. "Do you want this?" Quote. He didn't even get a single glance. This pretty much confirmed to him that something was wrong. He was just about to ask her what was on her mind when someone suddenly rushed in and whispered something in his ear. His expression immediately shifted. "Is this information real?" "Yes, we just learned of it." Quote. "I understand." Orson closed his eyes before shifting his attention towards Delilah. He felt compelled to tell her, given that she was directly related to the news. Delilah, as if sensing that something was wrong, Delilah turned her attention towards her father, her eyes seemingly cold and detached. Feeling her gaze, Orson didn't waste a second and told her the news directly. "One of your cadets has been attacked. I'm afraid he's passed away." Delilah's brows furrowed upon hearing the news, but the next words from Orson made her face change drastically. Quote. "It's the Evanis family kid." Bang! The glass in her hand shattered. 606. Under the faint light, a body lay on a bed. Though his complexion was rosy, there was no heartbeat, nor was there any breath. He was, in every sense of the word, dead. So, as a figure dressed in black garb stepped back, several anxious eyes looked in his direction. With a silence that felt like it would last forever, the figure eventually shook his head. "I do not sense any breath or any soul within the body. I'm afraid that he's not dead. I'm sure he's not dead." Leon abruptly stood from the chair, cutting the cleric off mid-sentence. His hair was slightly disheveled, and dark circles clung beneath his eyes as he fixed his gaze on Julian. He, of all people, knew that there was no way Julian was dead. The blood, it should have worked. And yet, I understand where you're coming from. This case, it is the first time I've seen something like this. Not offended in the least bit by Leon's actions, the cleric shook his head. In fact, he wasn't even sure why he was called in the first place. He dealt with souls and other related matters. He wasn't a medic. Nonetheless, he still complied, considering the status of the people who had called for him. Quote. For some reason, the body appears to retain its basic self-sustaining functions, keeping it from decaying. But at the same time, there's no soul present. For lack of a better term, it's just an empty shell. I don't. Leon's expression paled as he shook his head. Even though he himself knew the answer, hearing it from the cleric felt like a massive dagger to his chest. He covered his mouth as it opened and closed repeatedly. However, the more he tried to speak, the more he found himself unable to find any words. In the end, he slumped down on the chair, at a complete loss. How is it possible? I arrived on time. He should have still been able to live. It makes absolutely no sense. His expression was blank as he struggled to come to terms with the situation. He was also not the only one in the room. There were a few others in the room. Most notably, Atlas and several other higher-ups within the Empire. News of Julian's death had yet to be spread. In fact, only a very select few knew about the situation. Who has done this? Atlas's voice rang quietly across the room. When Leon raised his head, he almost felt his body shiver involuntarily as Atlas's gaze was fixed on Julian. He didn't seem either angry or sad. His expression was just neutral. And yet, it was such a neutral expression that seemed to give chills to his entire body. We still don't know. Another person answered, shaking their head before turning towards Leon. He seemed to be one of the delegates belonging to the Megrail family. He's the one who has found Julian in such a state. Perhaps he might know something more. Atlas turned his head, his yellow eyes piercing right through Leon as he shook his head. I don't know. I really don't know. Thinking about how Julian found himself in such a situation, he felt at a complete loss. The place he found Julian was completely pristine, with no signs of battle whatsoever. However, recalling the wounds on Julian's body, he knew that he had been through a lot. Was he teleported elsewhere and brought back? That was the only way for Leon to explain the situation. He wasn't the only one who felt that this was the case. But at the same time, considering how pristine his current condition is, I'm afraid that he must have dealt with some incredibly mag. That's impossible, Leon suddenly cut through, arousing the attention of all those present. Upon realizing what he had done, Leon's face fell, but he clenched his teeth. At this very moment, he needed to know who was responsible for this. Sadness and mourning came later. Taking a deep breath, Leon calmed his fluctuating emotions and raised his head. He then began to recount everything that had happened and how he had found Julian. When I found Julian, he was filled with injuries. The state of his shirt and clothes should be direct proof of this. The clothes were all torn and filled with cuts. That alone was enough proof that he had gone through a fight. Several other people also seemed aware of this, but we also noticed that, but his body is completely unharmed. I've also tested his body, and Julian doesn't seem to have any experimental healing abilities. How would you? It's possible that the ones responsible healed him in order to hide any traces of their techniques. Leon abruptly cut in. He didn't reveal to them that he was the one who had healed Julian's wounds. That was for a very obvious reason. And even if he did, it wouldn't change much of a thing. The ones who had done this were extremely careful. That's true. Atlas nodded, his gaze unnervingly calm. For them to also do it so silently and secretly. They're not an ordinary group. Though he said this, he seemed to have a clue as to who the ones responsible for this were. In fact, he wasn't the only one. Who did it? Leon's lips quivered as he felt extremely tempted to ask, but he stopped himself as he noticed the figure standing in the corner of the room. She had been silent the entire time, her face passive and seemingly unaffected by everything. However, her gaze, it had never once left Julian's body. It just lingered there the entire time, her thoughts unknown. Leon looked at her, his brows furrowing. Taking a look at her, she seemed completely unaffected, and yet. He blinked. She was gone, vanished, like she'd never been there. What the? He didn't bother looking for her. Instead, he turned back to Julian's body, and his expression cracked. He suddenly started to recall everything that the two had gone through together and his chest began to feel heavy again. Was this really? How is the situation? Delilah stepped into a modestly sized room, its walls adorned with quiet paintings that seemed to watch in silence. Plush sofas lined the space, and on one of them sat Orson, his expression grave as his eyes met hers. Is he? Yes. Delilah answered, her tone cold and even. It almost sounded as though she was completely unaffected by the situation. He is dead. There's no breath in him. I see. Orson closed his eyes and leaned back. What a pity. He was so young and talented. Some even compared him to you in terms of talent. Orson shook his head in disappointment. Talented individuals like Delilah were extremely rare, and even though there had been several that had been born before, none of them ever matured, with them dying before they could do so. Delilah was one such talent. If not for him taking her in, she would have. Are there any clues as to who the one responsible for this? Number. Delilah shook her head, and Orson paused as he looked at her. She looked normal at a glance, and yet, something about her felt a little off. Even though he knew her quite well, this was the first time he had ever seen her act like this. She was cold, so cold, to the point where it felt like the surroundings were about to freeze. I guess she must be in shock. Thinking about it, Julian was her responsibility as the Chancellor of Haven. In his mind, Delilah was probably feeling guilty for not being able to save him or notice a thing. Don't beat yourself too much, Delilah. At the end of the day, none of us was able to notice a thing. I understand. Delilah merely nodded her head before heading towards her room. Orson could only watch as she entered her room and closed the door. Clank. His face grew serious then as he took out his communication device and quickly messaged the others. He needed to get to the bottom of the situation. On the other hand, quietly entering her room, Delilah found herself surrounded by the dark. It embraced her from all sides. She didn't bother turning on the light and just sat down, embracing the darkness. She sat there in silence, her gaze lost and cold. The coldness persisted until she retrieved her communication device. Though subtle, her hand quivered as she opened it for the first time in a couple of days. It was then that she noticed several missing messages. All belonging from him. Delilah's gaze remained cold as she looked at the messages. Opening her lips, she closed them soon after as she pressed onto the messages and read them. It was a joke. I'm not actually getting married. Such was the first message that she saw. Her face remained indifferent as it hovered down to the next message. I don't know why you reacted like that, but I really was just joking. I thought you'd get it, but was I not obvious enough? There were quite a lot of texts. All of them said the same thing, but at the same time, the more she scrolled down, the more the messages changed. Did you see the message? He was persistent. Too persistent. I take it you haven't. Are you still mad at me? Yes, I am. I am going to the Congress today. I'll try to clear the misunderstanding. I bet you'll find it funny once this is all over. So you're really mad, huh? Yes, so stop texting. I'm sorry. Stop it. Clank. The communication device rolled down the floor as Delilah's hand quivered along her face. The indifference that had been marring her features was long gone, and in its stead was a constant quivering that she couldn't hide. Slowly, she brought her hand to her chest as a pain she had never felt before stabbed right through her heart. It hurt. It hurt so much. Delilah's lips continued to quiver as her gaze eventually fell on the small red diary on her desk. As her gaze wandered to it, the pain in her chest intensified. And yet, she found herself unable to stop herself from reaching for it, scrolling through it. Her gaze fell on all the bullet points that she had written. Some entries even drew a smile from her, though it wasn't a happy one. The more she smiled, the deeper the ache in her chest grew. And in the end, she reached the last page. Quote ellipsis dot dot quote. Staring at the last page, her face grew blank. She planned to fill more of it. Her plan was to fill the entire diary. And yet, that no longer seemed possible. A strange sound left her lips as her hand trembled. Eventually, reaching out for a pen, she wrote in the diary. The last ever point. Filled circle the one I love. And the most painful one. 607. A figure sat motionless within the darkness. The darkness didn't just surround him, it bent and curled inward, folding like fabric pulled by invisible threads. And then, Atlas emerged before the figure. He immediately knelt on one knee, his expression hard to decipher as Cithras slowly opened his eyes to see Atlas. Oh, my, all that Cithras saw when staring at Atlas was red. His entire body, it was red. It is rare to see you so angry, Dawn. I'm a little curious to know what happened, but before that. Cithras raised his hand and lowered it. Immediately, the red that seemed to want to seep out of Atlas's body started to fade, concentrating into a thick ball of red that focused within Atlas's abdomen. Then, with a casual flick of his wrist, the orb shot forth, funneling directly into Cithras's open mouth. He closed his eyes as it entered, a satisfied smile curling across his face. Not bad. Opening his eyes again, he settled his gaze over to Atlas. Have you calmed yourself down? Quote. Yes. Atlas gave a slow nod, the tension in his features melting away. His expression was calmer now, composed, like a storm had passed through him and left only stillness in its wake. Good. Now then. Cithras tilted his head curiously at Atlas. Why have you come here, and what managed to set you off so much? Quote. Quote. Atlas knelt in silence for a few short seconds before letting out a deep breath and speaking. Julian has passed away. Julian. Cithras raised his brow. Yes. His body was recently found in his room, his soul completely missing. I see. Cithras's face didn't change much upon hearing the news. At least, not at first. After a few seconds, his hand reached for his mouth as his brows furrowed. Dead. And yet I was almost certain that he was. His thoughts paused after a few short seconds as a smile soon marred his features. I see. Maybe I was looking at things the wrong way. Maybe from the very start, he was just a diversion. Catching Cithras's quiet muttering, Atlas could only tilt his head in puzzlement. Yet, despite his curiosity, he didn't dare ask for an explanation. He was in no position to pry his thoughts. Do you have a clue as to who the ones responsible for this are? Yes. Atlas nodded, his back straightening as his eyes grew sharp. He was almost sure of his guess. In fact, it wasn't very hard to guess. He thought about Julian's action during the Nurs Antifa Congress Day. He thought about how he had been indirectly responsible for getting them locked up and humiliated in front of everyone. He thought about how everyone had been invited by them on that very specific day. He thought about how the saint had been missing on that day. Atlas had a very good guess as to who had done this to Julian, and as he looked at Cithras, his lips parted. I have reason to believe it is those of the Church of Orichalou. In the middle of his words, Atlas froze, suddenly catching the shift in Cithras's expression. his smile stretching unnaturally wide, teetering on the edge of something unsettling. It was enough to send shivers down his spine. His lips parted, but no words came out. That was until Sithris spoke. "This is very interesting." He almost seemed to be enjoying the situation. Quote. To think he would fool me like that. As expected, only he can do something like that. Beyond the amusement, there seemed to be something else mixed in Sithris's voice. Was it anger? Surprise? Atlas couldn't tell, but the current state of Sithris was enough to give chills to his entire body. Slowly standing up, Sithris massaged his neck as he looked at Atlas. "If it's what I'm thinking, your pupil cannot be saved." His words were calm, but they were enough to make Atlas's features change. "He can't be saved. Wait, but, Emmett is about to wake up." Sithris's next words brought Atlas's words to a complete halt as his eyes widened significantly. He of course was aware as to who Emmett was. How could he not know? Quote. I previously thought that Julian was Emmett's agent. From the familiar scent of the extractor to his familiar personality. I waited patiently, even as he managed to ensnare you with his charm. I waited to see what he planned on doing. And yet, Sithris laughed. He had never been his agent from the start. He was just the unfortunate victim of Emmett's plan. Listening to Sithris's words, Atlas could only stand dumbfounded. Emmett's agent waited to see what he planned. What? You don't get it, do you? Atlas slowly turned his head toward Sithris, whose gaze seemed to pierce through the darkness, as if seeing far beyond what lay in front of them. Quote. It is time that we set everything that we've planned over the years in motion. Turning around, Sithris's smile slowly faded as the darkness started to swallow him whole. Oricleus is coming. Several days have passed since the incident. Julian's death brought no waves to the world. And that was merely because the news had yet to spread or be announced. This silence was entirely at the behest of Viscount Evanus, who had chosen to keep it hidden. Out of respect for him, the Academy, alongside the Megrail family, agreed to his terms. This also worked best for them. News of such a talented individual passing away was never great. Everyone had their own self-interest at heart. Aldrich was no different. To him, news of Julian's death meant putting a halt to a lot of the plans he had already set in motion. He couldn't afford to have that happen to him. At least, not yet. We're truly sorry for your loss. We're currently investigating the masterminds behind the incident, and we will update you immediately on the situation. Quote. I understand. Aldrich's face was cold as the delegates from the Empire arrived at his home, delivering Julian's breathless body to him. Quote. He stood in silence while staring at his son's body. His lack of reaction made the delegates uncomfortable, but they still chose to keep their mouths shut. At the end of the day, they were only here to deliver the body. He was a great talent and is truly. It's all right. Aldrich cut the delegates off before they could continue speaking. I'm not interested in the unnecessary speech. You may go. Yes. The delegates didn't linger for very long. Shortly after handing over Julian's body to the Viscount, they quickly departed. By the time they were long gone, Aldrich had already brought the body away into what was originally Julian's room. None of the servants or people working in the estate were aware of his actions or situation. And even if they were, they'd turn a blind eye to it. This was how things worked in the Evanus household. Quote. After laying Julian's body on the bed, Aldrich stood over him, his expression void of emotion. His face was cold, his eyes distant and unfocused. To anyone watching, he would have seemed like a stranger, detached, as if he had no connection to the lifeless figure before him. And yet, he was Julian's own father. Placing his finger over Julian's neck, Aldrich soon closed his eyes. The body shows no signs of decay, it almost seems to be preserving itself naturally. That is quite good. Opening his eyes again, he brought his fingers away and sat down on the nearby chair. As he did, his gaze hovered towards Julian's body again. He sat in silence for a few short seconds before the first cracks appeared on his face. Quote. Things are progressing as they should. I don't sense any of his blood anymore. That means that those from the church have taken it. By his blood, he meant none other than Oricleus's blood. For the first time in what felt like ages, Aldrich's expression began to shift as the cracks on his face started to expand. His lips trembled, and to conceal it, he brought a clenched fist to his mouth, leaning back into his chair in a quiet attempt to compose himself. However, in spite of his best attempt, he still let out a brief stifle as his lips pulled into a smile. Ha! His chest trembled as he found himself unable to hold his laugh back. He thought back to the start of the Congress and the sequence of events that had led to this very moment. Everything. It had gone as intended. Though it's unfortunate that I had to part ways with such a talented spirit user, it all works out in the end. The entire sequence of events that had occurred in the Congress was no coincidence. From the reporter to the fact that Julian had been sent there. It had all been planned for this very moment. By now, he likely believes Oricleus is on the verge of awakening, and that Julian was merely a fake all along. This will buy us quite a lot of valuable time. The smile on Aldrich's face widened in spite of his best attempts at trying to suppress it. But how could he not smile? He had been waiting for this very moment for a long time. A very very long time. Enough time to make anyone go mad. But he persisted. He persisted because he was told to persist. And all of it finally paid off. Staring in Julian's direction, Aldrich's lips slowly parted as his chest began to tremble, and the cold facade he had been keeping up for so long started to fade. I did good, right? Aldrich mumbled, the smile slipping away from his face as it was replaced by a raw, unfiltered emotion. Aldrich's lips trembled, but he just barely managed to force out a few words, his voice barely audible. All right, and just as the words left his mouth, Julian's eyes slowly opened. The once empty vessel returned to life as Julian's gaze focused on the ceiling of the room. He blinked a couple of times, sitting up to meet Aldrich's gaze. His expression quickly turned complicated shortly after, as his mouth opened and closed several times before he finally managed a single word out. Noel. 608. It was dark. The darkness stretched all around me, wrapping around me with its cold touch. What's going on? I didn't understand what was happening. It felt as though I was drifting in this endless darkness, with no end in sight. Am I dead? It was also then that I recalled what had happened prior to finding myself in this situation, and my heart sank. Indeed, there was no way I could have survived something like that. Attacked by several opponents at once, some even stronger than me, it was nothing short of a miracle that I managed to pull off what I did. But even then, it wasn't enough. I was still unable to survive. The realization left me completely unresigned as I continued to drift in this pitch-black darkness. The darkness thickened, growing colder with every passing second, each one dragging on as if it would never end. I just drifted in the darkness, waiting for my soul to slowly fade away. I thought about everything. From Noel, to Leon, and everyone that I knew. Most importantly, I also thought about her. Would she even care if I died? She did seem pretty angry at me towards the end. Angry enough to look at me like that. Perhaps, it's good that she hated me in the last moments of my life. It made the pain in my chest ease. At least, I now knew she wouldn't be affected much by my death. I felt better knowing that. And yet, the pain remained. It clung to me, buried deep within my chest, clawing its way inward as if trying to wrench my heart wide open. It hurt so much, and the more it hurt, the more I started to feel something amiss. For someone who was supposed to be dead, this pain felt a little too real. Too raw. How could that be? And then I felt it. The faint warmth coming from several directions. The darkness around me began to lift as I slowly raised my head, only to find myself surrounded on all sides by countless orbs of light, gently floating in the void. Staring into those orbs, my chest tingled. What is? The orbs, they seemed to be calling out for me. Beckoning me. As my gaze lingered on the orbs, I watched in awe as they began to grow, expanding rapidly in my vision before hurtling toward me at an unimaginable speed. I was shocked at first. Almost scared. The shock quickly faded as I sensed no threat from the orbs. Though they hadn't reached me yet, a deep instinct told me they meant no harm. And sure enough, when they drew near, they stopped, suspended in the void just before me. I stood in silence, staring at them without saying a single word. There were quite a few of them, and as I looked around me, they all felt like glowing stars. I slowly reached out for them, and the cold that had engulfed my body started to fade away completely. The closer I came to the orb, the warmer it became, and as soon as my hand entered the orb, it suddenly felt as though my mind blanked. In that moment, I started to feel in control of everything. As though the world seemed to be at the palm of my hands. Yet, despite that feeling, it didn't seem like I had become stronger in the traditional sense. No, this change ran deeper. It was as if I had gained a newfound mastery over my mana and emotive magic, a level of control I had never dreamed possible before. In this state, it felt like I could control my emotive magic to a point where I could have the same effect as when touching someone through speech. At the same time, I also felt like I could control the threads and skills in ways I had never thought possible. The sensation, it was euphoric, addicting, and the more I immersed myself in the feeling, the more it felt as though my mind was slowly starting to fade. No, I quickly snapped myself out of it, pulling my hand away and moving away from the white orb. What in the world was that? A newfound sense of dread invaded my chest as I stared at the orb. For a moment, I almost thought I was going to disappear. However, at the same time, I thought about the strange power provided by the orb. For some reason, it felt familiar. Yes, familiar, as though I had touched this sort of power in the past. But I don't remember ever touching something like this before. My mind churned as my thoughts drifted towards this strange power. The more I tried to think, the emptier my mind felt. No, nothing. I couldn't recall ever experiencing anything like this before. This was the first time I had ever experienced something like this. A strange black world filled with saint. It was then that I suddenly recalled something, and my chest grew heavier. Indeed, I had never experienced this sensation before. I was now sure of it. But that only applied to my current self. What about my past self? I recalled Leon's and Jackal's earlier explanation, and suddenly, everything began to fall into place. What I was experiencing now, it was none other than the source Jackal had spoken of. The strange power that seemed to belong to the gods. And the moment the realization hit me, the orbs around me suddenly started to stir into life. What is happening? Noticing the shift, I tensed up instantly. Based on what I'd experienced before, the source was terrifying, an overwhelming force that felt like it could consume me whole at any moment. I didn't feel at ease with the sudden changes. The orbs around me began to wiggle, shifting and weaving through the void, and my entire body tightened with unease. I kept my eyes locked on them, every muscle primed to react at the slightest hint of danger. I was ready to move, but then, my entire body froze on the spot as my mouth slowly opened in shock. An utterly unexpected sight unfolded before my eyes as the orbs expanded, their forms warping and shifting to reveal a cascade of scenes, each one vivid, surreal. And within them, I saw myself. There was the Julian version of me. The Emmett version, the past me, every fragment, every life, every version, I was in all of them. And slowly, the scenes started to enter my mind. Not all, but some. I felt a sharp pain stab right through my mind as the scenes entered my mind, each one different than the other. I started to recall things that I had long forgotten, and the fine line that separated me from the other version of me in the visions started to fade. I was slowly starting to integrate with all my previous memories. Or at least, tried to. There were far too many memories and moments. I understood that it was impossible for me to digest everything at once in one go. It would take time for that to happen. And just as the pain in my mind started to get overwhelming, it all stopped. The world grew silent. That was until, at some point, I'll need you to step in. I heard the sound of my voice drift in the void. I lifted my head and glanced around, searching for the source of the voice. But it didn't take long to realize, it wasn't coming from around me. It was echoing from deep within my own mind. This conversation, I started to recall saying such words in the past. They were to someone. To make this work, I'll have to die, and let go of these powers. It's the only way to divert Torin's attention away from me. He's sharp. By now, he's likely pieced together fragments of my identity. He'll try to get close, to study me, to strike when I least expect it. I need to let him think I was merely a ruse. A fake meant to distract him from the real me. The more the conversation dragged on, the more I started to understand. A scene fleshed itself in my mind. And soon enough, another voice echoed. I understand. My heart clenched. That was Noel's voice. I'll do it, but. His voice was the same as ever. However, I could see the traces of hesitation and fear in his voice. That was when I remembered trying to comfort him. Don't worry. We'll see each other once all of this is over. I know you'll be by my side the entire time. I want you to watch over me while you greedily consume everything around you. Before then, you must persist. I won't be allowed to do anything. You need to understand your position, Noel. You are in no position to do anything but use your mind. Use that mind of yours to your advantage. I'll be waiting. I understand. The voice stepped there. However, my mind didn't. It continued to churn, replaying the scenes over and over again. I know you'll be by my side the entire time. Noelle was with me the entire time. My heart pressed. Then, it suddenly started to hit me. Leon, Noelle, Leon, Noelle. Leon was Noelle spelled backwards. My heart squeezed at the realization. Could it be? But then, no, he's not. The part of me that was slowly starting to assimilate with my memories told me that wasn't the case. And most importantly, the clues were starting to filter into my mind. Leon's real name is not Leon. Who named him Leon? Aldrich. He was the one who named Leon. Ah, from the very start, it was right under my nose. Julian's weird obsession with swords. Who planted them into his mind? I thought about how Emmett was originally a sword user and my lips quivered. It all suddenly started to make sense. Aldrich, Leon's strange sword art, the one that I felt so familiar with. Who truly gave it to him? What about his strange ability to heal? I knew Leon told me he had found it, but did he really? I didn't need to think to know the answer. It was yet again, Aldrich. And most importantly, that unique sword art, who did it originally belong to? In that moment, everything started to make sense. The weird sense of oppression I felt from him whenever I interacted with him, and his ability to think several steps ahead, and why I felt so in tune with Leon's strange sword art from the moment I saw it in spite of me not being talented in the sword with this body. Aldrich, he was none other than Noelle. My brother. And as that thought echoed through my mind, the world around me burst into blinding light. In the next instant, I was staring up at a blank ceiling. Slowly sitting upright, I turned my head and saw a pair of hazel eyes staring in my direction. I stared at his face for a few moments, but those moments felt like they stretched into eternity. Slowly, my lips parted, and a name left my lips. Noelle, a name I wanted to say for so long. 609. From the start, I pressed my lips, my chest growing heavy as I stared at the figure sitting opposite me. His face was different, his build was different, and everything about him felt different. He was so different from the brother that I knew. And that shit hurt more than I expected. Just how much has he gone through to be like this? You were always here, watching over me. I closed my eyes, feeling my chest tremble as a certain pain surfaced from deep within. The more I thought about the situation and the struggle Noelle had gone through, the more obvious it became to me how incompetent I was as an older brother. I don't need your apology. Noelle's voice suddenly cut through the silence. Staring at me, he sighed. You're always like this. You never change. But I'm glad you haven't changed. He seemed a little relieved as he spoke. I opened my mouth, but soon closed it. That was because I noticed a sudden shift in Noelle's expression as he looked at me. Taking a deep breath, Noelle leaned back on his chair. He seemed to have calmed his previously fluctuating emotions and appeared more level-headed. The change took me a little by surprise. He really had changed a lot since the last time I had seen him. What? As if sensing my thoughts, Noelle looked at me with a smile. You thought I'd cry like in the past? That I'd come over and hug you until you comforted me? Ha. I let out a bitter laugh. He was spot on. I would, to be honest. Noelle's words took me a little by surprise. However, his next words made my expression turn serious. But I don't want to do it like this. At least, not in the state that I currently am. What do you mean? Noelle didn't answer me. Instead, he started to unbutton his shirt while taking off his blazer. My brows furrowed at the sight, but I didn't overreact. I knew he was trying to show me something. And soon, Noelle removed his shirt. What? My expression crumbled the moment he did so as I felt my breath get stripped away from me. I stared at Noelle, lips trembling as my gaze lowered towards his chest. Or more precisely, the gaping hole on his chest. My entire body started to tremble. They took my heart. Anger started to surge from deep within my body. I could hardly contain it. I'm alive, and yet, am not. I merely function as a walking corpse while they use my heart to fuel their lives, carelessly giving it away as if it's some sort of prized reward. Rattle. The bed beneath rattled. I was starting to see red. I can feel it whenever they squeeze my heart and extract my blood from it. I can feel everything. Noelle's expression paled. I'm supposed to be immortal, and yet, I can feel that my heart is slowly dying out. They've also started to notice it, hence why they've stopped giving it away like candy while preventing anyone from having it. Rattle. The rattling grew more intense, the rage within my body threatening to explode at any given second. And it was just as it was about to explode that a sudden memory flashed in my mind. Why would you do this? I thought we were on the same side. How could you? How could you? Same side. Ha, you. Torin, there are things I see, things so far beyond your grasp, they would tear your very soul apart if you could glimpse them. They follow me, relentlessly, through my sleep, they bleed into my daydreams, and they torment me whenever they have a chance. But, these sights, these truths, I never asked for them, yet they are mine to bear, dragging me into the abyss whether I wish to look or not. I am cursed to see what others cannot even imagine, and it is a curse that bleeds through every moment of my existence. Single quote. Why you have gone mad, Emmett. You have gone mad. Maybe I have. No, I probably have. But in my madness, I am sane enough to know that you all must die. The anger seemed to fade almost instantly. It all started to click then as my eyes closed. Indeed, they all must die. I took a silent breath before opening my eyes again and staring at Noel, who had put his shirt back on. His expression was calm, but I could see the pain in his eyes as he sat down and looked at me. Now that Torin has set his sights away from you, we managed to secure some time for ourselves. We should be able to last until the bait dies. By bait, I understood immediately what he was trying to say. He meant Jackal. From the very start, this had been a scheme in order to use him to lure Torin away from us while buying some valuable time. It also became clear to me that Cithras was probably aware of my identity as Emmett. He might have not done a thing because he was watching me, or perhaps was next to me all along. I hoped it wasn't the latter. The plan worked flawlessly, but if there was one thing that left me disappointed, it was the fact that I no longer had the ability to see visions. Not only that, but the system was gone as well. Looking at the 4-leaf clover on my arm, I saw that all the leaves were dim. Even if I tried pressing one of the leaves, I knew it would lead to nothing. I had essentially lost all powers related to Oricleus. This left me at a complete loss. Especially since it was all I relied on to grow in spite of my lacking body. Now that I could no longer grow with such means, I felt handicapped. What was I going to do from this point forward? You're worrying too much. Noel comforted me as though he could read my thoughts. Quote. Seeing how you're looking at your arm, I presume you're worried about your powers. Yes. A complicated expression marred Noel's face in that moment. Then you don't have to worry too much. You'll eventually get them back. I know. There was no doubt in my mind that I would get them back. I was just at a loss with regards to what I'd have to do from this point forward. You know, and yet you're still making such a face. Haha, I could only laugh. Quote. I'm just thinking about what to do from this point forward. Without those powers, I'm essentially weaker than before. I know I'll get them back, but how long do you? It won't be too long. Noel cut through my words, his expression stern. This prompted me to raise my brow, and just as I was about to ask why, his lips parted. The powers that we wield are not things that regular humans should be able to wield. Our powers, they're all essentially borrowed powers. We never truly grasped them for ourselves. What? I looked at Noel in confusion, his words leaving me at a loss. We never truly grasped them for ourselves. What could he? You're the biggest example, brother. I am, yes. Noel nodded while letting out a long breath. Pointing at me, his tone grew hoarse. Quote. You were the first of all 7 of us to lose yourself in the power. What? I opened my eyes wide. However, thinking about it and recalling certain moments and scenes, I knew that this was most likely the truth. Your powers were the strongest of all of us. You suddenly started to change. You became different, colder, more pragmatic, and everything you did seemed to have a purpose. Maybe this is why you had yourself erase your memories. Maybe. Noel took a pause, staring directly at me. Quote. Maybe you were afraid of going mad again. I took a deep breath upon hearing his words. If it was like he said, then it made sense. I had always thought about the reasons why I found myself in this strange new world with memories that seemed to be completely different from the truth. In the end, was the reason just because I didn't want myself to remember all that I knew? Or was there more to it? I wasn't sure, but there was something else that I was more curious about. You said something about us never grasping these powers of ourselves. What do you mean by that? I mean what I mean. Noel answered, his eyes closing faintly. These powers don't belong to us. They were bestowed upon us when the meteorite came down and destroyed everything. They allowed us to immediately gain access to the source and make us gods. But But the source is not something that anyone can just tap with borrowed power. In the end, it will reject anyone who tries to grasp it without full knowledge of it. With his expression turning complicated again, Noel looked at me. He didn't have to say anything for me to understand what he was trying to imply. So in the end, I got too close to the source and got rejected by it. Turning mad, That's one of the theories I've come up with. I let out a short breath and blankly stared at the ceiling. So in the end, is it even possible to tap into the source without the borrowed power? Of course it is. Noel nodded, his gaze changing as he looked at me. Didn't you just do it now? But there's none of your old blood inside your body. You managed to tap into it completely by yourself. But not for long. That doesn't matter. You still managed to tap into it, and that's enough. Proof of what you need to do. I blinked my eyes slowly. Proof of what I needed to do. What did I? You need to be the eighth. My eyes widened as I looked at Noel. Don't tell me. Noel slowly nodded his head, his expression as serious as ever. Cithras is also aware of it, and is working towards it. Noel pressed his hand against his chest. The key is in everything that you've learned so far. Emotions. The words unconsciously flowed out of my mouth as Noel nodded. Yes, you need to become the eighth god. The god of emotions. 610. I'm sure Torin has already figured the same thing you figured out a while back, but the key to becoming a true god lies in emotive magic. My gaze subconsciously drifted towards my right arm, where a four-leaf clover tattoo appeared. A few things started to make sense. Is this why I was given this tattoo? That's correct, Noel calmly answered with a nod. The tattoo was meant to help you grasp emotions more clearly, a way to push you into truly understanding them. Especially for someone like you, who struggles with emotional awareness. Oh, I laughed bitterly. I wanted to refute his words, but I couldn't. Indeed, thinking back with regards to my past, I knew nothing about emotions, nor was I very good at understanding them. If not for the tattoo's powers, it would have been impossible for me to get to where I was. My talent in emotions. Perhaps it wasn't as high as I thought it was. But even so, I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to it than that. The deeper I delved into emotions, the more fluent I became in understanding them. I had now reached a point where the tattoo was no longer necessary for me to improve on my emotive magic, and that was probably the goal from the very start. You'll eventually get your powers back once all of this is over. However, for now, you'll have to make do with what you have. I already understand this much. Thinking about it, I almost felt pity for Jackal. Not only was he currently under Cithrus's watch and hunt, but he was also probably going to lose his mind. The powers were probably going to consume him soon enough. I had to bide my time. Only when the powers began to completely overtake his mind did the moment come for me to take them back. Still, there was something that I was curious about. I turned to Noel. If you say that the powers made me lose my mind, wouldn't it be more appropriate for me to just let go of them? Losing Oricleus's powers did suck, but at the same time, I could do without it. I had reached a point where I could. If I just poured all of my attention on my emotive magic, I was confident in reaching the 5th level not far from now. If keeping them meant losing my mind, then it would be for the best if I let go of them. No, you need them. Noel was quick to shut down my thoughts as he stood up and shook his head. Reaching the source alone is extremely hard. The powers will serve as a gateway for you to reach the source, and, in turn, understand it better. Though the moment you gain your powers back, you'll start to lose your mind again, if you manage to grasp the source, the sense of rejection will disappear and you'll be able to use both powers without any problem. So that's what you mean. I more or less started to understand the situation. In order to access the source easily, I needed to take my old powers back. The moment I gained access to the source, my goal was to try to understand it and become the 8th god. The key to all of this was emotive magic. Although I didn't understand why that was the case, that wasn't important as of this very moment. The most important part was getting stronger and furthering my emotive magic. Bringing my fist near my mouth, I bit my finger. My thoughts drifted towards the entire situation as I tried to think about the next steps that I needed to take in order to further my emotive magic. However, these thoughts vanished the moment I looked up and saw Noel staring at me. Oh, right, how could I forget? You probably have everything planned out, don't you? Noel stared at me for a brief moment before suddenly cracking a smile. Of course, I do. He flicked his hand, and a map appeared out of thin air. Laying it out on the table next to me, he started to explain. This is the eclipsed maw. It's located in one of the larger red zones within the mirror dimension. My eyes squinted as I looked at the map. For some reason, the shape of this red zone felt familiar. It also appeared to be surrounded by red coloring. Was that the sea? As if reading my thoughts, Noel smiled. It's Australia. Well, more or less. It's a little different, but it's what remains of Australia. Ah, no wonder it felt so familiar. Leaving that aside, it's important that you go here. Why is that? Because that's where you'll find Oricleus's eye. I paused and looked at Noel, who kept his gaze firmly locked onto the map. I'm sure you are aware that the relics are key in all of this. You might not know why, but that's not important right now. The most important thing is collecting them. You should, by now, be in possession of the mirror and extractor. Yes, Leon should be holding the chalice. I swallowed quietly. It seemed like Noel was already aware of everything from the start. Looking at him now, and seeing his serious expression, he felt foreign again. He felt like the Aldrich that made me shiver whenever I looked at him. As expected, he really had changed. But even though he changed, he was still my brother. The last relic is the Oracle's eye. It's probably the most important relic of all four. Torin most likely thinks it's hidden somewhere in the academy, but it's not. Noel pointed directly at the map. It's right here and you have to collect it at all costs. Me. I blinked my eyes. What about you? Me. Noel turned his head and looked at me with a bitter look. In my state, I can hardly kill a fly. I'll be the one to die, and I can't die. The moment I die will be the moment Torin finds me. Noel's face suddenly tightened, his expression turning grim as he quietly mumbled, I don't want to be locked up again. I really don't. Anything but that. I pursed my lips, forcing a breath out. From the way he spoke those final words and the look on his face, I could tell his life hadn't been easy in my absence. I couldn't begin to imagine the kind of torment he'd endured while I was away. The thought alone, it pissed me beyond any measure. Yes, it's about time that I fulfilled my job. I quietly nodded my head and placed my hand over the map. All right, I'll do it. Noel smiled without looking at me. He then closed his eyes and took a deep breath. I'm sure you must be tired since you just woke up from death, but I don't think we have the luxury of time. Ah, yes, neither one of us knew how much time we had at our disposal. It all depended on Jackal. For how long could he last against Cithras? He had the backing of the church and the round table, but could he really do anything about someone as powerful as Cithras? Neither of us could really put an estimate on the time, which was why it was important to act immediately. There are not that many cracks that you can enter to reach the eclipsed maw. Your best bet would be to enter that crack, but... Noel's face turned, complicated as he looked at me. What's wrong? That. Noel scratched the tip of his nose before sighing. You understand that your current position, right? I do. What was he talking about? And why did he seem so concerned? Torin is no longer the same Torin of the past. He's different. He has eyes and ears everywhere. There aren't many places he can't see or hear. What you think might be your closest friend could very well be him. I swallowed quietly. I know that. How could I not know that? I had experienced it all already. He's most likely already gotten close to you. My mouth opened, but no words came out. I wanted to refute his words, but I didn't know how. But where was he going with this? That's why it's important for you to remain dead. Even though most people think you're still alive, those who do know should keep thinking that way. Ah, I finally understood where Noel was trying to get at, and the place that we needed to go in order to enter the mirror dimension. It was none other than the academy. 2. Where she was. Nobody must know that you're still alive. I took a deep breath, pursing my lips at the same time. In all honesty, I knew this from the very start. Noel didn't need to remind me. However, he probably felt the need to after seeing my reaction the moment he mentioned the academy. He's right. For now, I must remain dead. There was no other way around it. Cithras was that scary, neither one of us could take a chance. But even then, as a certain figure drifted in my mind, I slowly brought my hand to my chest while trying my best to forget about the pain. Surely if it's her, it should be fine, right? There was simply no way for Delilah to be linked to the inverted sky and Cithras. I had seen her hatred firsthand. If it's... No, don't think about it. Noel cut through my thoughts as though he could see through them. Brother. His expression turned softer as he looked at me. He seemed to want to help me, but he soon shook his head. We can't take any chances. I'm sorry. No, I understand. I stopped Noel there and then. He didn't need to say any more. He had already suffered so much, and yet, here I was lamenting over something like this. What sort of brother was I? Slap. I slapped both sides of my cheeks before taking the map with me. Let's not waste any more time. Wait, Noel called out to me just as I was about to move. As I slowly turned my head, I saw him staring at me with a smile. I paused as our eyes met. And then, it's good to see you again, brother. He scratched the back of his head, his cold expression vanishing, replaced by an all too familiar expression as his eyes moved away from me. I just wanted to say that. My lips trembled, but soon, I drew enough force to nod my head. Quote. It's good to see you, too.